Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is John Wilson. You may or may not know John by name, but if you've ever gone to Chattanoogan.com for local news, you know John Wilson and his baby. John, welcome to My Morning Cup. Before we trace your history as a newspaper man with ink-stained fingers who launched one of the first full-service internet newspapers in the country, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
I drink hot tea.
Oh, really?
My wife and I are not, one thing we agree on, we're not coffee drinkers.
Ever been a coffee drinker?
Never well, I've tasted it, but.
Just enough to say, I don't need to have it again?
Yes, just don't care for the taste, but love tea.
We've done about 120 episodes, and I think we've had maybe 4 tea drinkers. And the folks who have switched to tea, I don't think we'll ever switch back. Mm-hmm. How do you like your tea?
Green tea, usually just straight green tea.
Just straight green tea?
I think it's probably good for you, too.
Yeah, I think there's some health benefits to that. Maybe that's why I drink so much coffee. So glad you're here. You know, your website is an institution in this town, but I don't think enough people know John Wilson and kind of your history and how all that started. So that's what I'd like to do is just talk to you about, you know, growing up, how you got here, that kind of thing. So you were born in North Carolina, Rutherford County. Well, whereabouts?
It was Forest City, Rutherfordton, Spindale are the towns there, and we lived in Spindale on a farm when I was born. My father was still farming. Yeah. And then after me, he had a second daughter, so he couldn't afford. He wanted to send us to good schools and that sort of thing, so he went into town and started working at a shoe store business.
What was the closest big city to us?
It's east of Asheville.
Okay.
And
so kind of in the mountains.
Yeah, Morganton, Marion, Shelby.
So he left farming for a more urban job.
Well, to make some money for his growing family.
Yeah.
But they love the farm and hated to do it, but they always sacrificed for the 3 of us.
So you've got 2 sisters?
2 sisters.
Are you the middle child?
Yes. Older sister's 10 years older than I am, and my younger sister, Stephanie, still is 5 years younger. She still lives on the old home place up at Golden Valley in Rutherford County.
That's
beautiful
pretty cool.
Area.
Yeah. So it gives you a chance to get back there.
Right.
Now, one of the things in the background information that I was kind of intrigued by was your family's been in North Carolina a long, long time, dating back to Big Tom Wilson, who was a hunter and tracker and killed 112 bears. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I did I researched my side of the family and my wife's side of the family and did 2 little books on each one. And I found out about the Wilsons of Yancey County, North Carolina, where Mount Mitchell is. And there was one Big Tom, real tall guy like me, I guess. And he did kill a lot of bears. His most was 112. And maybe 113, and he had a son one time who killed 112, and he stopped so he wouldn't break his father's record.
And there was one other tidbit on there before I move on. Found the body of Professor Elisha Mitchell. She went over.
That was a man. There was a competition apparently between Mitchell and Kleeman. I believe it's Kleeman. Which mountain was the highest, and Professor Mitchell was out exploring and working on his theory, I guess, and apparently slipped over a waterfall.
Oh.
And Big Tom, he was missing for a while, and Big Tom followed the broken twigs and all that and found the body.
Oh, wow.
And that enhanced his fame.
I bet it did. Mm-hmm. So your family grew up generations in that area, and then when your dad decided to move into the city to get a job, was that Lawrence, South Carolina?
My dad, his father, I found out they had a lot of little mines that people individually would work, mica mines and that sort of thing. It was blown up in a mine, and I found out that his father was blown up in a mine. So my grandfather and great-grandfather died that way.
Oh, man.
And so my father, there were a lot of kids. He went to an orphanage at Goldsboro, North Carolina. And then, but he got real good care there. He went on to Lee's McRae College, a year at Wake Forest. And then he came to Rutherford County and worked in the mill there where he met my mother.
Mm-hmm. And how old were you when he decided to stop farming?
See, I guess it was when my younger sister was born, so I was about 5.
About 5, and that's when you moved to Lawrence, South Carolina?
No, we moved to Forest City.
You said that.
The same county, and he worked for a couple of different shoe stores, but ended up with Belk's, I think. And then when I was in the 5th grade, he got transferred to Lawrence, so we moved there.
And Lawrence is where you went to high school?
Yes, it's right below Greenville, Spartanburg.
And what was high school like? Were you an athlete? Or?
I played, I liked all sports, played basketball.
Well, you're a tall guy, aren't you?
Right.
Yeah, how tall are you?
6'3".
Are you? And talk a little bit about your high school years. Was that when you decided you wanted to be a reporter? Was there a particular moment that you said, a class or anything?
I think from the time I was born, I wanted to be a reporter.
Oh, yeah?
I always did, and I really don't know why, but when we lived on Maple Brook Street in Lawrence, and I put out a little paper, the Maple Brook Gazette, and I hand wrote it.
How old were you?
Maybe 5th, 6th grade, something like that.
Really?
And had news about the neighbors, and I remember one story, Calvin Coolidge Craighead was moving, so that was the big news. We hated that because he was the best skipper we'd ever seen. He'd skip up the street whistling. And and then I sold the Grit. There was a paper, it may still be around.
The Grit? The
Grit. And it's a compilation of national news, kind of sensational, interesting stories.
But in the 5th grade, you took the time to
write a
paper. So would you sell copies of it?
I probably did. We didn't have many people on Maple Brook Street. Maybe 10 copies. Maybe, I don't know.
Would you have to handwrite them all out?
I guess.
Oh wow!
Mm-hmm.
And
I wish I still had copies.
Yeah, that would be great. Mm-hmm. Did you ever report anything about the neighbors that someone came back and said, "John, I don't know if I would have put that in"?
I don't think so. Probably didn't do it very long, but I had it in my blood right from there.
Yeah. What was the interest for you?
I really can't explain why I've always wanted to, but I was a carrier for the Greenville News, and then the Greenville Piedmont was the afternoon paper. So I carried. My father would take me around, and carriers would win trips. We would go to Clemson games and Furman games, and maybe more Furman than Clemson. But it was always around newspapers.
Yeah.
And then when I was in high school, we had a student for a day. You'd go follow somebody. And, of course, I chose a newspaper, and Mr. Kibler, I remember we went to a Civitan club and speaker, and he had forgotten his pad, and they had paper tablecloths. So he just started writing on the tablecloth. And then at the end of the meeting, I remember him tearing the whole thing off. So that further made me want to be a crazy reporter. So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to attend those civic events.
Yeah. As a reporter, you kind of always go where there's excitement and where the news is, and I like that.
So when you were in high school and you knew you wanted to be a reporter, did the school have a school newspaper that you worked on?
I don't believe I did in high school. I don't remember much about that, but I don't think I did, but in college I did.
Were you geared towards classes like writing and literature and English?
I just always felt like I could write, and I didn't really need to go to journalism school, like Columbia. But history, I felt I needed a good background, history and English, so I kind of focused on those liberal arts.
So when it comes time for graduation, how in the world do you end up in Chattanooga?
My mother had heard a radio pastor, I believe Dr. J. Allen Blair, who had a daughter who went to Covenant College, and that got her wondering about Covenant. And then I got on a bus and came up here, and Roy Fagan picked me up at the bus station, took me up, and it was this big castle on top of a mountain, and
pretty spectacular.
Well, it had a neat snack bar with all these blondes in there, and I thought that's for me, and it was neat.
That was when you just came to visit?
Yes, first visit. I was telling Lang Long about it, and he said, "Wilson, you can't choose a college based on the snack bar." But I guess I did.
Yeah, why not? Well, a good snack bar and a bunch of blondes.
Yeah.
I mean,
they've got and still do, the Blink, it's called, and it's got made up trees. It looks like you're in a forest or something. It's kind of a neat place.
Really?
I've been to Covenant.
I haven't ever been up there. So you're at Covenant. What are you majoring in if you know you want to be a reporter?
It's still English and history.
Still English and history.
Mm-hmm. And they had a paper that I worked on a lot. And remember I did a kind of investigative piece involving the Dade County sewer system, and there were a lot of problems with the Covenant sewage treatment. So I was already getting into something like more than the normal college papers. I remember that. Yeah,
not just reporting on the college team or something like that. Did you gear yourself or lean towards investigative reporting? Was that where your passion was?
Not so much. I guess my theme was sewage treatment. I think I wrote one article for the Lawrence Advertiser, and it was on tertiary treatment. So I guess sewage treatment was my focus back then.
Well, you know what? Based on what I'm seeing in our local news, sewage treatment's still a big issue.
It is.
All the growth out in Ottawa and everywhere else. We need another plant, huh?
Right.
Well, they ought to come to the expert. In terms of the school paper, besides the sewer issue, was there another big issue that you tackled?
I think I was a sports editor for a while, and I would write about the basketball and all that. I played 1 year, and after that, I played the church league here and really enjoyed that. Our Chattanooga Valley Presbyterian had a team, and we'd play different churches, and so.
So you're starting to fall in love with this area?
Yes, I loved to hike out on. I love Lookout Mountain, and it's just 100 miles and all these caves and waterfalls, and so I loved it from the start. And I like wildflowers, and there were a lot more then than now, I think, that had been picked out. And
so when it comes time for graduation, did you want to stay here? I guess I'm trying to get to how you got to the News Free Press.
I thought that I would maybe just end up I thought Tennessee, and maybe start out with a smaller town with a weekly paper or something. But that last summer I stayed at home in Lawrence, and then I came back for a wedding, and I had a endorsement letter from Joel Bales, who was a journalism guy at Covenant, who later went on to start God's World. Mm-hmm. It's a Christian news from Asheville, North Carolina. And I took it down to the Chattanooga News Free Press, the afternoon paper, and got an interview with Lee Anderson, and he hired me. So I wasn't expecting that. That was more than I expected.
Yeah, that's a pleasant outcome for that. What is that, about 1971 or so?
71, and September, I think.
And Lee Anderson was a longtime editor or opinion editor at
he
the
was.
time? The News Free Press.
Yes, he was. He was the son-in-law of Roy McDonald, the owner, and I found myself in the midst of a lot of characters and a lot of people who were really good to me and helped me along.
Well, and a lot of people who are really giants in Chattanooga history too. You know, Mr. Roy and obviously Lee. So talk a little bit, John, about going to a newspaper in 1971, because as you know, and we're going to get to Chattanoogan, but the newspaper business has changed dramatically. But at that time, that's what it was. I mean, newspapers were not only behemoths, but they were really your main source of information.
Sure were, and had most of the ad income.
Right.
That slid away later, but when I got there, we were still on manual typewriters, if you can believe it.
Wow. And
upstairs, it was the old linotype, kind of like Gutenberg in 1400s. So
didn't change much in 500 years.
It hadn't changed much in 500 years, but in my career at the Free Press, it changed drastically.
Yeah. Well, explain what linotype is for someone who doesn't understand the printing process.
It was done up on the we were on the newsroom was on the second floor, and the composing room, they call it, was on the third floor. I didn't go up there too often, but it was little blocks of letters in a board type thing, and it was painstaking process.
So they had to take every story and basically build it letter by letter, and in a form that it's going to look like on the paper, lay it out and everything else.
Yeah, there was a machine that shifted it all around, but I'm not exactly, but it was. I think Gutenberg would have recognized it.
Yeah, and just to kind of compare that to where we are today and the changes you saw. I mean, nothing changed for like 500 years, and then from 70 to 2000 in 30 years, the whole world blew up print-wise.
That's right.
That's pretty unbelievable.
When I was first started, each of us had what they call a spike, kind of a dangerous-looking thing that stuck up on each of your desks, and you would write your story on that manual typewriter and tear it out and then put it on the spike. And then David Lightning Palmer, the copy boy, he would come by and grab the story off the spike and run it up to the city desk. And then Julius Parker was up there and Buddy Houts. And they would look it over and then put it on their spike, and Lightning would grab it and take it over to his dad, Stanton Pokey Palmer.
Lightning and Pokey?
Lightning and Pokey. And at the copy desk, there was a ring of people there on the copy desk. They would read it more for grammar and that sort of thing. Yeah. And then Lightning would get it again and run it over to the chute, and he'd pull the thing, and it would go up to the composing room, and they would start the linotype process.
I just love the fact that the copy boy's nickname was Lightning.
Right.
I guess he
was
earned
pretty
that,
fast. He was pretty fast.
But his dad's name was Pokey. Was he kind of slow?
He was very slow.
But I don't think a lot of people who would be listening to this today understand just not just the process, but the manual intensiveness of it. Not just manual typewriters, but you're typing your story out. You've got to put it to where they got to take it to someone else. Someone else got to read it. They're going to make some changes.
Take it by hand.
Take it all by hand. Yeah, you didn't just email it over, did you? No.
Pretty soon after I got there, we got the big blue Selectric typewriters, and that was a big advance, but it still was a linotype situation. But it was just we still used the spike. Mm-hmm. but it was easier to type on than the manual.
When did they finally do away with that process? When they brought computers into the reporters?
The spike process?
Yeah.
Later on, it was a while. It was that way a long time while I was there, I believe. Later upstairs, they had a rough form of the computer, and I don't know how all that worked, but we were still with a spike for a long time.
Yeah, probably most of your time there then. Huh?
Almost all my time there.
Going back to starting at the paper and kind of your reputation is as a historian and knowing a lot about Hamilton County. What were some of the things you were assigned to cover, both beats and individual stories, that really got your interest into digging into the history of Hamilton?
I started, I got interested in genealogy and families, and I got to where I would write once a week a story about a different family, and if they went back to the pioneer settler, everybody's got a unique story. And so each week I had a family story. That's one thing I did. But J.B. Collins covered the city. It was city commission back then. And I got to where I covered the county. I covered the county. It was the county council back then, and the quarterly court and all that. And so that was, and I covered the county school board. So JB was city, and I got to be county. So, but I guess the history was kind of a sideline for me.
Was that what spurred you to write the history of Lookout Mountain?
All that experience I had at Covenant, going out hiking and all that, and about the hotels that had been there and had burned down or fallen down. I noticed there had not been a book about Lookout Mountain in a long time. Robert Sparks Walker wrote a great book. So I started writing a book, and one day I was working on it at the paper. Roy Morris Jr. said that I did most of my work on company time on it, so maybe that was part of it. But Mr. Roy stopped by and said, "I heard you're working on a book about Lookout Mountain." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Let's publish it." So they had a job press there at the paper, and he printed the Lookout Mountain, Scenic Historic Lookout Mountain, and advertised it and all that. And then he was pretty old then. I noticed there hadn't been a book about Chattanooga itself in a long time. So I worked real hard for 3 years and he published Chattanooga Story, a history book about Chattanooga. And he gave me full page ads and
wow,
and paid for the printing up front. And both of those books sold a lot of copies. They eventually got out of print, but he loved history himself. He did several family books about the McDonald's and McDonald Farm on Sail Creek.
He was a very unique guy, very civic oriented, wasn't he?
He was. You'd come in and see his desk, and you couldn't believe all the material piled on it. But if you asked him about something, he could go to that pile and pull out what he wanted. He pretty much started Blue Cross, and then after he'd done that a long time, a bunch of civic leaders came to him and said, "Erlanger's in trouble. We need you." And he said, "I've got all I can do with the paper and Blue Cross." And they talked him into being the chairman of Erlanger Board. Wow. And Sunday afternoons he would work on Erlanger, and he saved it just like he made Blue Cross. So he was a wonderful businessman.
Yeah.
He started it out. Their family had the home stores, grocery stores, and they would put out a little paper advertiser deal, and they put a little news in it, and they'd put more news in it, and that became the Free Press. And he got to where he liked the newspaper part better than the grocery part. So he bought the Chattanooga News, which had been here since 1888, and put the two together, News, Free Press.
And wasn't his philosophy in terms of a newspaper to to have a lot of pictures and a lot of local peoples and be very local?
Definitely was, yeah, local, and that really worked for him.
Yeah. And looking at Chattanooga, that obviously had an impact on you too.
Yeah, he had a great impact on me. I try to copy him. I wear his white shirts and copy him any way I can.
Yeah, well, he was obviously a guy that really shaped where we are today. I want to talk a little bit more about your time at the paper before we get into Chattanoogan.com and how all that came about. Any particular stories that really stick out for you that you covered?
I got to go to see the Medgar Evers case.
Oh, yeah.
Having trouble thinking of the town in Mississippi.
Jackson?
Jackson. Yeah. Went to Jackson to cover that. Byron D. La Beckwith.
He lived up on Signal, didn't he?
Lived on Signal. And he would come he and his wife would come into the paper pretty often, so we got to know them.
Really?
And before he was charged, of course. And so that was the connections why they sent me down there. And I interviewed him after the verdict and all that, and got to hear all the Evers family, and so that was a little bit of history.
Yeah, that's a lot of history.
Another big case was the Bobby Hoppe trial.
Yeah,
Auburn football hero, and charged with a murder that happened, I think, 30 years earlier, and that was a big one. Leroy Phillips was one of the lawyers. Bobby Lee Cook, who was a great lawyer from Summerville, Georgia, he was on the case. And the Signal Mountain murders, where there 3 people killed on 4-wheelers, and there were several trials done at Lafayette, Georgia. There's a Parker case.
Oh, the Sam Parker case?
Sam Parker case, and then the case with the bodies at the crematory.
I forgot. That was right when I first moved here, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there were a lot of, and that's the thing about being a reporter, especially at Chattanooga and being the owner, I can go where the top stories are, so that's been fun.
Yeah, because as a reporter, you're being assigned on where you're going.
Yeah.
But doing that county, covering not just those stories, but the county council at the time and the city commission at the time, I'm sure you developed a lot of relationships with a lot of folks who were serving on those boards, and you probably got to know Dalton Roberts pretty well and folks like that.
I sure did. Yeah, it's always important to get close to at least some people there who can. Usually, there's one person, your go-to source person, and but Dalton was great, and enjoyed Claude Ramsey. And when I first started, it was a little while. It was the old county council with Judge Frost at Chester Frost Park is named after. He was still there, so that goes way back. Remember him a little bit. Jack Mayfield and Bob Long and that group. And then the 1978, the President Forum, and I worked with Reuben Taylor and some of those for a long time. So there's been some great friendships with those.
So Reuben's been part of the county commission since 1978.
First as a commissioner, and then later the county attorney.
It's funny how that string of history just kind of stays together like that. Let's get to the merger of the paper, because that's where your idea is born. So 1999, the News Free Press and the Chattanooga Times come together. It wasn't just a business relationship, because a lot of morning and afternoon papers shared a press or something like that. They full out merged, right?
We had shared. There was a big competition between the afternoon News Free Press, the Morning Times, and at one point, the Times started another afternoon paper.
Well, I didn't know that.
And Mr. Roy filed suit and won the suit. And so there was all of that. And then there was some combined printing out of that. but we always had separate offices.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I'd be at the report at the family paper forever, and that was just fine. But we started noticing that a lot of towns anymore couldn't afford, for some reason, we didn't know so much at first, couldn't have two papers. It was hard to have a two-paper town because all the other, there was a steady loss of income by papers to the TV stations and the other media that was coming on. So the same thing happened to us, and it was announced that the paper had been sold to the Husband family of Little Rock. And
that's who owns it today is WECO.
Yes, and right after that, they bought the Times, and then they had the merger.
Okay, I didn't know they bought one before the other. That makes sense. So the newspaper model, as we talked about when you first started there in the 70s, newspapers were just cranking and jamming.
Yeah, we had a big classified department.
Yeah.
That was a big money maker, and Jim McNally was the classified, and he would go off to regular newspaper conventions, and it looked like that would go on. You had pages and pages of classifieds.
Yeah.
But then as the computer came in, you've got these free classified, and it just went down to almost nothing.
Yeah, you could almost trace it to Craigslist and the free classifieds like that because,
right.
and I've told people this, particularly when I first moved here, or any newspaper, even in Memphis where I grew up, you could walk in and at least I think it was here in Chattanooga, there'd be a glass window, and behind it was the classified folks all on the phone taking those classified ads. And that was a moneymaker. But once the internet kind of established itself, it took all that away.
Sure did.
And that changed the model. So that's where the sharing printing presses and then the merger come in.
And then it becomes, you go from two papers to one, and then it becomes, can you keep the one?
Yeah. Well,
the revenue was going down that much. And so I stayed on. They let some people go right after the merger, but I stayed on a little while because that's all I'd ever known. But I was bored. I liked getting scoops, and there was nobody left to scoop. And so for first time ever, I was watching the clock. I'd never watched the clock before. And so I started looking at other ideas. And at the time, I didn't really know much about the internet at all. When I would want to do an email, I'd ask John Vance, business editor, to do it for me. I didn't know how to do email. And but there was another. I started thinking. I heard the idea of internet paper, and it made a lot of sense to me. You could just immediately post your story. You didn't have to wait on the press and wait on the carriers to take it out. You could just do it right then. So that was a huge advantage. And you didn't have to have a big newspaper building on 11th Street. You could just do it from your home. And so I decided to launch out on that. And a lot of people thought it wouldn't make it, but we were going to try.
Well, and that's by curiosity, because you're a dyed-in-the-wool newspaper guy. When did you get interested in the internet, or did you, or was it just because you find a different way to deliver the news?
It was the only option, and it sounded like a great option. Eventually, it was going to take time to build, and so I had a press conference and launched this thing with just a few of us, and basically lived off my wife's salary for about 5 years, teaching salary.
Mm-hmm.
And then it started getting more advertisers. I always felt that if you had the content, you had all these readers coming to see the content, that the advertisers would follow. And that's pretty much happened.
So talk a little bit about when you make that decision, I'm going to leave the paper and I'm going to start this internet newspaper, which not many people were doing at the time. You're on the cutting edge. And you go into your boss and say, here's what I'm going to do. Was the reaction best of luck to you, or like, wow, that'll never work? Because you had to have some skeptics.
Yeah, I didn't really tell them anything. They were kind of anxious to get rid of the old timers. Mm-hmm. We made a lot more money than the rookies, so they kind of pushed us out pretty much, and didn't leave with great feelings. And so there wasn't any discussion with them about, and I didn't really know at the time, but I started working on it, and I knew I couldn't stay there.
So that scratched that itch you had for the journalism aspect of it. How did you start? Did you start at your home? We're in the Business Development Center. Did you utilize?
Started in the Business Development Center and had just a few people. And we thought at first we'd have deadlines, but soon threw that out the door.
There's no deadline.
No deadline. And just gradually built it up. A big problem was the technology of it. We started out, I had a young guy working with me, and he had a sister in Washington State, and they had a internet deal out there, but it didn't work very well, and it would be down, and I would be going in the middle of the night knocking on the door of my local tech guy, fix this, and so it was a while before it got more reliable. And finally, another Covenant graduate, Ed Sunder, who's a great tech guy, he helped us out made a new layout, and he's made 2 or 3 layout changes through the years. He still oversees it, and without him, without several people, it would probably collapse. But he's one of the people that keeps it going. And now we don't go down very often, thankfully.
Oh.
So, but at one time we went down a lot.
But that was also when the technology was rather new, because really
right.
the internet started to hit in the early 90s, in the late 90s. It was when the bubble came up, and a lot of the tech companies had their issues, but technology got better on it. You mentioned you can go without deadlines, and I can tell you from being in a broadcast newsroom that the toughest transition with the internet was getting the newsroom to understand that you didn't have deadlines, or you shouldn't hold it for your 6 o'clock news. We had to change the culture of, we're going to hold that story because we don't want to tip off our competition, to the point of, no, you put it out there. Number one, you got it first. Number two, they're going to be behind. And number three, if you're going to hold it, they're probably going to have it anyway.
Beat you.
Yeah. So it really did change everything about that. What's the structure like now? Do you utilize your own reporters? Do you utilize stringers? Where do you get all the content that you put on the site?
See, we got about 32 people on payroll, and we got about 4 main editors, and we get a lot of stuff by email. Mm-hmm. And it's a matter of putting it in our style and posting it. And we've got several other reporters, about 6 high school reporters.
And high school sports are important for something like that, aren't they?
Very important. I'd love to be able to do more. But,
yeah.
We put more resources toward that, and because that's something you really can't get anywhere else. You got to have somebody there. That's mainly set up.
That's a good size. I didn't realize you had 32 folks working for you. That's as big as any broadcast newsroom in this market. That's a good size. You get good coverage out of that. Having come up with the idea, and those first 5 years were tough, and where you are now, what are you most proud of with Chattanoogan.com?
I'm just proud of all the people who say they depend on us. I don't think they'll let us quit, and We get a lot of make a lot of friends of ardent readers, and through the years, and they'll give us tips, and so just proud of the way it's turned out, and it's kind of a community bulletin board, I guess. A lot of people send out press releases, and the TV's not going to really have a thing about a home economics meeting, but we'll put it in, and so the Times is not going to have all those little things necessarily, maybe in their community paper, but it's important for all of that, I think, and we try to let them know all that's going on. That's one thing that's sad about all the papers that are going away. Some counties now don't even have a newspaper, and a paper's valuable to be kind of a watchdog and inform the people. So we think we found a way. We don't have a whole lot of income, but we've got enough for those 32 people. So it's not a huge money maker, but it's allowed us to keep being reporters, keep being writers, and we've got some real good columnists that otherwise they would not have had a voice. Randy Smith and Mark Wiedmer and Paul Payne, a lot of others.
Well, and from my perspective, it's also allowed you to pursue your passion. As the industry was changing, your passion was investigating journalism and that kind of thing. And they took your platform away, but you replaced it with something even stronger and better.
Right.
I've got one more. Before I get to the last question, I do want to read a quote to you, and because I think this means a lot. This is from David Carroll, who is the main anchor at Channel 3. John is a walking history book. He took a chance when he started Chattanoogan.com, but you can't hit a home run unless you swing the bat, and he hit a grand slam. John Wilson's a local treasure. I think David said that pretty good.
That's very nice. David's a great friend and confidant, and that was nice.
Yeah, well, I think he speaks for a lot of people.
Thank you.
Before I get to the last question, John, I want to remind our listeners who makes all this possible, and it's thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority for sponsoring My Morning Cup. Follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do-good-here to explore exciting career opportunities at TVA. All right, John, last question. It's my standard last question. What would you tell that 25-year-old John Wilson is important for a happy life?
A big part is to find a job that you like. I know a lot of people are kind of miserable in their jobs, watching the clock. And if you can be like me and find something that you love to do, that'd be a big part of it.
Makes the time go faster, doesn't it?
It does.
Well, you're providing a great service to our community, and I know everyone relies upon it. Can you believe it's been 25 years?
In a way, in a way not. Yeah.
Some days, yes. Some days,
Right.
no. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming in and sharing your story with us. You've had a great impact on the community, and you've always been very generous to me over the years and have helped me in a number of situations. So I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Consta Media Advisors. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.